morning, everybody. Sorry, we're a little bit tardy in joining you this morning with technological issues which we hadn't forecast. Welcome to Online Farm Sunday, and welcome to Leckford Estate, 2,800 acre farm in Hampshire. My name's Andrew, I'm the farm manager here, and for the next 15 minutes we'll have a chat about what we're doing on the farm as part of integrated farm management, part of climate friendly farming. So by way of introduction, we have a estate map showing the main block of the farm, the 2,800 acres. We do contract farm the neighbouring farm. Where we're standing just now, we're in the middle of our block, and in the course of 15 minutes, obviously we can't see very much of the estate, but we've got a few props which will help us guide a little bit of discussion as we go through the next sort of 15-20 minutes. I've got a few colleagues to help me this morning, but just to introduce what we produce on the farm. We produce fresh produce, apples, pears, but mushrooms as well. We produce grain from our arable enterprise, which we mill into flour. We produce rapeseed, which we cold press on the farm into rapeseed oil. And of course, from our fruit enterprise, we have cider and juice from fruit that doesn't quite make the grade for dessert apples, and from our vineyards, our own sparkling wine. We'll do a little bit on fresh produce and a little bit on arable and see where we get to this morning. Any questions, comments, please post them and we'll do our best to answer them. If we can't answer them during the course of the presentation, then we'll do our best to answer them later on. But first, let's hop over to our orchard here. We're in our Bramley orchard, and pleased to introduce Colin, who's our fruit manager. The theme is climate friendly farming. What are we doing to help the climate? And of course, a big part of what we do in farming is, we put inputs into a system to gain the outputs from it. And some of the key inputs into our system, Colin, are chemicals and fertilizers. So can you just explain, give me an example of where we're reducing our reliance on chemicals and fertilizers?
Okay, so if we have a look at the orchard itself, we can see there's lots of sort of weedy sort of growth underneath the trees. We don't generally tend to apply herbicides if possible, so what we tend to try and do is to allow kind of Mother Nature to actively grow under the trees. This of course keeps the ground covered, so we're not exposing the soil, we're not losing any kind of moisture through evapotranspiration. We're kind of allowing Mother Nature to become even more biodiverse, and that kind of supports chemical reduction through spraying on the trees itself. So we're kind of introducing and sustaining more some beneficial creatures and insects. And throughout the season, if we need to monitor any pests in the orchards, we'll hang some of these pheromone traps in the trees. Inside the trap there will be a sticky base and a artificial chemical lure to attract the male species of any target pests that we're trying to identify, and that will then tell us exactly when and how often we will need to spray. Another factor we employ is a nice open structure of the trees within the orchards that allows lots of sunlight and air through the trees. This can help us to combat any sort of diseases like mildew and canker. It just allows lots of nice airflow through the canopy, and of course airflow is very important in keeping sort of disease at bay effectively. So yeah, that's kind of some of the things that we're.
That's great. That's great, Colin. Another important factor in fruit production, fresh produce production, is food waste. And the statistic that always grabs my attention is if food waste were a country, it'd be the third biggest country in terms of greenhouse gas emissions after China and the United States. So we can all play a part in reducing food waste. certainly in our orchards here, we reduce food waste by making sure that the apples that don't make the grade for the stores, for the packs, for the pre-packs and for loose sales, we harvest those, and that's essentially what we make our juice and our cider from, those apples that don't make the grade for a dessert, for cooking or for eating quality. Thanks, Colin. We'll now move on to our arable production. So Joanne, who's behind the camera here, thank you Joanne, is helping this morning. We grow about 1,200 acres of arable crops, and that's on our farm. We grow another 1,000 acres for the neighbouring farm. They're combinable crops, i.e. they can be harvested with a combine harvester, so wheat, oilseed rape, barley, oats, peas, linseed. We grow a range of crops, and crop diversity is very important in an integrated rotation and a regenerative rotation where we're trying to add back to the soil as well as take crops from the soil. So follow me, Joanne, and we'll go and meet our arable manager, Tom. So it's a sunny morning, which is not always the best thing in farming, because we've had a dry month and we're kind of desperate for a little bit of rain, not too much rain. But Tom, we're standing in a field of oilseed rape. Same question to Colin. 60% of the energy that's employed in growing crops is in the form of chemicals and fertilizers. So take chemicals first. What are we doing in this crop to reduce our chemical usage?
So with first of all, we have quite a wide rotation. We have sort of a six or seven crop rotation for our oilseed rape, 6-year crop rotation, which then reduces the build-up of pests in the soil. And then we've what we've done here, we've actually shown a companion crop. So if come out and show a little bit more, we've got buckwheat here. So I don't know if you've seen in the press recently, but a lot of farmers are giving up growing rape because of the cabbage stem flea beetle,
Which causes this sort of damage here, Tom,
shot holding in the leaves. So I mean, it only takes one bite for them to knock it off when it's very small, like this.
So what does the buckwheat do then? We've sown that along.
We sowed the buckwheat a couple of days before we sowed the rape, and the buckwheat grows very quickly, and the idea is it camouflages the rape. It's quite a simple thing, and it seems to be reasonably effective. I mean, in previous years we've had to give up the crop, whereas this year there is a crop there. The other thing we have done, we've chosen a variety of rape called DKX Steel, which is very vigorous in the autumn, so it can get up and grow away from any damage that it has. And then the third prong on the attack is nutrition. So we've made use of organic manure. So we have spent mushroom compost that we get from our mushroom farm, and then farmyard manure that we get from our beef enterprise, and we apply these just before sowing, and then with the aim to get the crop up and away quickly. So we walk this way.
So, so reducing chemical usage, we focus there on control of cabbage stem flea beetle, which is the main pest.
Yep.
So the use of companion crop, in this case buckwheat, proving to be useful. There are other options, of course.
But this has worked quite well.
And you mentioned there the use of organic manures and spent mushroom compost, which reduces our reliance on bought-in fertilisers. Yeah. So in those two examples, we're reducing our indirect energy usage, the energy that is inbuilt, intrinsic in the inputs. Another important use of energy on the farm, of course, is the diesel that powers our tractors. So
over the past few years, we've transitioned from a mainly plough-based system, which basically involves turning the soil over. So when we've got a soil pit down here, you see we haven't actually got a great deal of soil here in Hampshire. 8 inches would be about as much. 8 to 10 inches would be as much as we would have. So effectively the plough would be turning over all our soil, which burns a lot of diesel. So we've transitioned from a plough-based system to a minimum tillage-based system, and now we're transitioning from the minimum tillage system to a direct to strip till system. So we're actually only cultivating the area where we're sowing the crops. So if you have a look here, this area here is loose, and this area here hasn't actually been moved at all. So there's a drainage channel here, and this allows the crop to put its roots down, whereas this part of soil here and this part of soil here hasn't been moved at all. So hopefully that will improve the soil structure. We're not burning half as much diesel because we're only using cultivating half the ground. We're retaining the moisture, and we're providing somewhere for the worms to live as well. We have actually dug a hole here, and he didn't do it by hand, as much as he tried to tell he is.
Oh, right. Took quite some time. It's a very simple hole here, but just to illustrate how on our soils how shallow our topsoil is. So we're down here to the parent material, the chalk. You've got the transition layer, which is kind of brown and white, and then this top, as Tom said, 8 to 10 inches, 20, 25 centimetres, and you can see the roots in there. We're on a margin. For those of you in the RPA, this is not a margin that we get paid for, this is a voluntary margin. And so you can see the roots in there. It's dried out a little, you can see the lack of rain. There are worms in there, but we maybe work hard to find them now that I've kind of dug the hole. When we used to plough the fields, we'd be moving much of this. So if we were ploughing to 20 centimetres depth, we'd be moving 2,000 cubic metres of soil a year, which is probably the equivalent of 3,000 or 4,000 tonnes per hectare. So you can imagine the amount of energy and diesel that's used in moving that. So Tom was talking about how we now establish our crops, and we'll move round to just have a look at the seed drill. But we've done a calculation that just on our in-hand farm, we've saved enough fuel every year that would power a car, typical family car, to drive around the earth, drive around the world 5 times. So that's just on our farm, with a move away from the plough to what is a strip till drill. So let's wander round to there, Tom.
Get out the hole,
The soil, of course, is very important. It's important we know as much about it as possible. So we've done our electromagnetic scanning of the soil, so we know the differences in soil type across the farm and within the field, and that's helping us to be more precise about how we manage our crops.
This will allow us to target our inputs much more accurately, so we could push areas that have better soil, or pull back on areas which aren't quite as productive. It might allow us to reduce our fertiliser input. We can do variable rate seed. Maybe it shows areas that we might need more organic matter. We can also target our fertiliser.
Yeah, so we're doing targeted soil measurements. Soil organic matter, it's not too bad. We're about 5.2%, but our aim is to increase that, and it would be excellent if we could increase that by 0.1% per year, because that would be the equivalent of sequestering an extra 9 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per year. And with a farming target of getting to carbon net zero as soon as possible on farm here by 2035, building up soil organic matter is a key part of that.
Okay, this is our Taylor drill. It arrived in January 2020. It's a very simple drill. You have a leading time that creates a channel, and then the seeding time behind, which slightly widens the channel, creates a bit of tilth, and then blows the seed down the back. It has quite a wide inter-row spacing, so I think 4 inches, no, 7 inch. And then there's a batter board here which folds it back in, and a harrow, and that's it. So we will go straight into stubble with this, and we're only moving half the soil, so less diesel and time savings.
So
And moisture savings.
yeah, so on the theme of climate, we were talking there about reducing CO2 emissions from energy use. But of course, in farming, you know, it's sad to say we're large emitters of nitrous oxide and methane. But things we've been talking about in terms of nitrous oxide emissions are helped by how we manage manure, how we cultivate our fields. Methane as well. We're a mixed arable and livestock farm and fresh produce farm, so we do have cattle on the farm. We've got a few minutes longer. We'll just wander down the field here. You can see, I did mention it's a voluntary margin, but we've got a whole network of field margins around the estate, and the field margins are very helpful again in reducing chemical usage on the farm, because these are habitats, these are nesting habitats for predatory insects, for pollinators as well. And those predatory insects, those beneficial insects, you know, which can live in our field margins, can migrate into the crop. They can migrate up to 250 metres into the crop, and eating on, you know, pests like aphids. So what we have on the farm is a policy which is no part of any field is more than 250 metres, in fact 200 metres away from any field margin. So we're relying heavily on the insects, the predatory insects that we're trying to provide a home for, a natural home for. We're relying on those to kind of reduce the need for chemical inputs. And as Colin said earlier, when we do have to use chemicals, it's on a needs-must basis, so we're monitoring for the pests as well. As we approach the edge of the field, we've got something other than a field margin here. So we've got, looking a little bit tired now, but it's a winter bird food cover. So largely dominated by millet here. But if we take the farm, the whole of the farm, about 5% of our cropped area is turned over to pollinator mixes, winter bird covers, aiming to improve our farmland bird populations, aiming to improve populations of pollinators. Of course, pollinators are critical to the farm here because they're used to pollinate our oilseed rape. They're important in pollinating our pears and our apples as well. So commercially critical service provided by our pollinators. We've just got a couple of 3 minutes left.
Maybe that might take up. Someone's asking, have we seen an increase in wildlife on the farm since we've been sort of changing these methods?
None of us within this group have been here for that many years, but the reports that I'm getting from colleagues who have been here and have been monitoring wildlife, yes, definitely we are seeing improvements in biodiversity, but importantly we're trying to put in place a much more regular and disciplined monitoring programme so that I can answer that question in the future much more definitively. So just now it's quite subjective, but we do have a number of volunteers who monitor things on the estate, and we're quite well served actually in terms of data on bird species, moths, bats even, that we have on the estate. We'll just pop the camera through the trees here, Joanne. Now, focusing across the dry valley onto the vineyard, we've got 17 acres of vines, about 7 hectares of vines, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier, so we're producing our own sparkling wine as we saw in the introduction. Just behind the vineyard, which looks like a beige field, is a spring barley stubble that Tom and the team have put a herbal ley into. So that's a kind of forage grass seed mixture that contains, I think, upwards of 15-16 different species. The aim being to increase the resilience of our forage area. as I said earlier, you can just pan just to the right of the trees there, Joanne. We've got some cattle up there. We've still got 700 odd cattle on the farm, so it's important that we have a robust and climate friendly system of production. The cattle are really critical on the estate because we've got a vast area of water meadows and chalk grassland combined, and for those to be managed effectively, for biodiversity to be enhanced, the cattle perform a critical kind of management tool in that system. Now, of course, they produce a fantastic tasting beef from it as well. But as you scan round, pan round, you can see other means of climate friendly farming. Basically trees, hedgerows. Tom's responsible for managing 40 kilometres, 25 miles of hedgerows. We've got 370 acres of woodland, and they're very important sequesters of carbon. So in terms of climate friendly farming, it's very much involved now. Many farmers, most farmers are kind of turning their focus on to how to do even better than we've been doing over the last sort of few years through measuring, monitoring, tweaking our practices to ensure that we're having much less of an impact on the climate, and indeed much more positive impact on their climate because of the fortunate position we're in to manage so much land. Not said much about the cattle, but I know at 10:30 folks at CEDA at University of Reading will be talking a bit more about cattle. So in the meantime, thank you for tuning in, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. As I say, any comments, any questions, please post them and we'll do our best to answer them as we go through the day. But have a good Sunday. Thank you.